Well, I'm glad that my friend Indiana Jones came up with all these great statistics and everything, so I'm not going to repeat any numbers, and I will approach this talk from a more philosophical viewpoint so that you can think about it and see what there is that needs to be done. Like Tim, I've done some undercover operations in Asia, mostly in India, Calcutta, and New Delhi, and the amount of animals that are wiped out just to satisfy that trade is unbelievable. So many, for every one animal that arrive over here, so many animals would die. And putting it into a global perspective, it is enormous. The global wildlife trade, I can't remember if Tim has mentioned it, global wildlife trade is comparable to the global drug trade, and in fact very tightly linked to the global drug trade, and also the global arms trade is about the same kind of volume. And how the global wildlife trade and drug trade are linked together is that, for example, when you smuggle drugs from one country to another, they very often use animals as carriers. They hide the drugs in boxes full of snakes, for example, so that the customs officials would just take a look at the snakes and just close the lid and let it through. Sometimes they would smuggle the drugs inside of a snake. They would put cocaine, for example, into condoms and shove it up the rear end of a snake until the snake is full, and then they would sew up the anus of the snake and fly it over. And the snake is very often not inspected, and quite often they die. So, you know, it is an incredible scene. And it is also very dangerous for the investigators. When I was in Calcutta, I did an undercover operation for 2 weeks to go into some enclaves to find tiger bones and tiger skins and so on, and I found some tiger skins that are so fresh with red ants crawling on them. And also the chartreuse is impacting heavily on the endangered antelope in Tibet. And my success, well, I was lucky that I was pulled out from the enclave into a tiger reserve to directly work with the villages around the tiger reserve, because my successor, who was a Japanese guy, I mean, I was posing as a Chinese buyer for these products, and my successor was a Japanese guy, and he was killed within 3 days of the operation. So it is not a picnic. And if this kind of drug trade doesn't exist, then, you know, then this Japanese guy doesn't have to go in there and doesn't have to get killed. You know, we're just trying to solve the problem. So that's the world wildlife trade in a global basis, very briefly. Non-native species. If you want to look at non-native species and invasive species into a certain native animal community, it is quite devastating. It is not too likely that it's going to impact on the United States, but if you look at another place in which, let's say, rats are exotic. I mean, rats obviously are not exotic in North America, but rats are exotic in some tropical islands, for example, and sometimes through ships coming into port, the rats escape onto the island and wreak havoc on the native fauna. And then the people try to control the rat population by importing mongoose into the community, and the mongoose wipe up the rats, and then they become ravenous and begin to attack the birds. So it is best to leave the species where they live and protect the habitat. Also, if you have an exotic animal trade to satisfy the exotic animal ownership industry, what you're actually doing is that you're legitimizing the importation of exotic animals, and then you empower the parallel industries such as zoos and circuses, you know, things like that, and even animal experimentation. If exotic animals are not allowed to be imported into the US, there would be no chimpanzees for experimentation. So everything is linked. I'm glad that Carrie's jungle friend sanctuary is doing so well, and I really congratulate her for her effort, because her effort is necessary, because given the existence of monkeys that are not wanted, imported and then not wanted, what are we going to do with them? We have to have a humane repository for these displaced individuals that cannot probably be returned to the wild, particularly those that are bred in captivity for the purpose of exotic animal ownership. Those animals don't have a life. They don't know what the natural habitat is. They don't have a normal life, and they go crazy sometimes under restrictive conditions. And tigers, for example, if you import tigers, or if you have tigers as bred in captivity as a pet, or in zoos, these tigers are of no value whatsoever as animals to reintroduce back into the natural habitat. It is a total fallacy that we have tigers here, and if the tigers are wiped out in India, we can re-import the tigers back into India to repopulate those habitats. Number one, those habitats are going to be gone pretty soon. Number two, even if those habitats are still there, you cannot reintroduce captive bred tigers back there because they lack the skills to survive. They don't know how to be parents, they don't know how to hunt, and they don't know how to deal with other tigers. So experiments have been conducted to introduce tigers back into the natural habitat, and they all perished. So, and also genetically, if you are trying to preserve a species from extinction, you need, if it's Bengal tigers, you need Bengal tiger genes. If it's Siberian tigers, you need Siberian tiger genes. And if you need, okay, and if you, if it's a Sumatran tiger, you need Sumatran tiger genes. But those tigers that are bred in captivity are indiscriminately bred, just as long as they look like tigers. Particularly if they are white tigers, they are so depraved as to deliberately breed white tigers for entertainment purposes, because the general public seems to be fascinated by white tigers for some reason. But white tigers, number one, are not suited to survival in the natural habitat because they're poorly camouflaged, and they cannot, they're much compromised in terms of their capability to catch prey. And number two, they have to actually inbreed tigers to produce the white color, because the white color is recessive genetically. So they have to, make the tigers commit incest, basically, to come up with white tigers. So it is, as far as I'm concerned, very unethical.